Hello. I'm not sure when I'll upload this, but it's not been very long since I did my last video. I think I just felt pretty thoughtful, and um, I'm alone in the apartment, which realistically doesn't happen that often. Hence why I'm a bit of a infrequent uploader. Um, So I've got to make the most of it while I can. I don't like filming myself with other people around, so which I think is understandable. It's really awkward to talk to a computer. Um, and I feel like I'm only really now kind of slightly getting used to it. Um, but I mean, I'm a long way from that. And also, I do this all very unscripted. Not that I would ever really be interested in doing scripted videos, but it's all off the cuff. So awkwardness is to be expected. Anyway, I've got my cup of tea and my sad seal. It's my favourite cup. It's a good one. Um, I've had a bit of a up and down week. Again, it's not been that long since my last video, and my last video was, I guess, kind of in a similar way, maybe a bit more raw, I suppose. I feel like I'm a little bit better um, in terms of just like kind of stability of mood, but um, I was definitely just sort of like on the precipice for a little bit of a slump, which, as I said then, was to be expected. I just did just get a rejection from a job that I was really quite passionate about. Um, so yeah, what's been up? I have been very conscious in these last few days of the fact that I am very influenced by my kind of idea of people's perception of me still, which is not something I really had thought I'd shaken off, but I think because I've done so much thinking about self-worth and the toll I've taken just due to kind of massively devaluing myself um, because I believe that people didn't value me um, in a way which is completely unrealistic because even if people didn't like me, they never thought of me as much or as critically as I thought they did. Um, and I do that's still a sentiment I hold now, like the way that I tend to think about myself is unhealthy, has been very unhealthy in the past, but this week I think I've had a bit of a lapse in that kind of thinking. And I've been feeling very insecure. Not necessarily in the ways that I have done traditionally, because I think I'm also just very aware of it now. And I know that it's been impacting my mood in a very significant way, but in like with a tangible source, I guess, which on one hand is helpful because I can kind of remedy it in, well, at least by acknowledging why it's there. But on the other hand, it's also frustrating because although I kind of will sit there and be like, I know that I'm overthinking this. I know that this is not the intention of the opposite party. No one is trying to make me feel bad. Everyone is just involved in their own lives, in their own busy shit. And me spending lots of time and energy mulling over this, thinking on this, tormenting myself with this. It's number one, obviously not good for me. Number two, completely blown out of proportion with the actual material stakes of the situation. Um, and even though I can acknowledge that, and I've been like thinking it over, it's still been there in a really, I guess, physical way almost. If it's kind of a very like bodily feeling, and that I just feel like I've had like um an ongoing pressure almost in my head. Um and it's just been kind of oppressive, I guess. Um yeah, I didn't have a particularly good evening last night, because I had just had a pretty shit day working at school, um, with in a position where I wasn't really needed. So I felt like I kind of wasted a lot of time, and I think that's the worst thing for me, especially when I'm, um, you know, just mulling about, not really staying occupied in any way. I have at once kind of, this feeling of aimlessness, um, and also a sort of anxiety around being told off. I think I've discussed this before. My tragic, crippling anxiety around being told off as an adult. Um, but yeah, so basically, I need to be doing something, or it puts me in a really bad mood. And yesterday was just a bad day, bad example of a day. Um, and I got home, I had an email about a speculative, um, a speculative email that I had sent out. The person was asking me back if I had completed the forms and was ready to send them in, and I hadn't, because I have been putting it off, mostly just because I've been really busy over the Easter holiday. But I was like, oh shit, no, I need to do this now. Um, and I was kind of like beating myself like up. I was beating myself up, sorry, because I was like, well, I know I need work. I don't know why I have managed to like put this off and let this slip by. So I just kind of did that for like the 3 hours it took to complete the forms. It's just, I don't understand why. Just let me send in my CV and a cover letter. I don't want to have to reformat my CV so it fits inside your form, especially when it's a form that basically doesn't work. Anyway, I did get it done and I got it sent off. It was basically a formality anyway, because it's a position which is very much in need of staffing. So hopefully I might, eat my words, but hopefully that will come through with something. Although it's still not a major improvement, in my kind of financial stability, if I do get the role, unfortunately. I'm just in a constant battle with my ever declining bank account. I can play more about that before, so I need to get over it really. Um, what else? Yeah, so yesterday I was in a bit of a shit mood. This morning I was in a bit of a shit mood as well, just because I was waiting to see if I got work and I didn't. So I had to do the kind of embarrassing, um, pageantry of getting myself dressed and ready for work, making myself a lunchbox, getting all my documentation ready, just for me to sit on my couch and not receive um, any work. So that is the way it is, and um, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to find a way to occupy myself, um, and turn the day around, turn the week around. Because as I said before, so much of this kind of mental grappling right now is because I really, really, really want to get better, and it's really hard to do um, when I'm under a lot of financial pressure and also, having such shit luck with my work at the moment. Shit luck, but also, you know, I'm just in a, I guess, shit time for finding work. That's fine. I came onto here with the I don't know, goal, with the implicus of discussing some thoughts I have been having recently um about, I think it was mostly about desire. I've been thinking a lot about sexuality and desire, and shame. Not necessarily in regards to myself, but I don't know. I think I was having a big think the other day while I was doing the dishes about how desire, like carnal desire, mostly like I suppose sexual romantic desire, is often at odds with um personal politics. Not always, but or kind of like personal standing, in that you kind of have the trope of the big bald businessman, like CEO, who secretly is like a like wants to be submissive, wants to be dominated by the sexy secretary dominatrix. Um, but I don't know, no smoke without fire, right? There's definitely people out there who are doing some crazy shit. Um, like, you get the conservative politicians who, once every 5 years there's a big scandal about them doing something really like out there and weird, um, and not very conservative. And I do just think, I don't know, it's interesting with that. And like, I think I was like reading a think piece on kind of feminism and sex work and female sexuality and the kind of, what's it called, derision between um a woman's feminist, personal like feminist desires, and then her kind of carnal wants to be like dominated or humiliated, or like essentially like have all of these horrible things said and done to her consensually, but that fundamentally kind of go against any of the politics. I'm not describing this very well, but I feel like, well, I hope that you kind of understand the I guess overall theme that I'm trying to explain, the contradictory nature of kind of the conscious wants, the conscious values, um the like face you show to the world, I guess, and the um kind of subconscious desire, or at least not necessarily subconscious, but the um kind of lower level, I suppose, the under the underworld that exists within your kind of like mental landscape, which you're not always kind of in touch with, slash are actively trying to repress, because everyone is trying to repress something, probably. um and I guess I've just been thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking a lot about, I don't know, why people cheat as well, um which is interesting because I feel like there's a large part of my kind of character where I know that for a long time I had so little self-worth that I expected um my partner to cheat on me, and I didn't really see it as a necessarily negative thing because I kind of saw it as a kind of transactional exchange, one which I wouldn't necessarily be able to fulfill. That I'll be kind of in a debt of affection or um, I don't know, confidence, or romantic prowess, and that it will be something I would kind of have to let be outsourced from other people. And I know that a lot of the kind of people in my life who are going through complicated relationship um dynamics, who are in and out of breakups, and sort of a lot of them are in sort of open relationships but realize that the kind of boundaries of said open relationship are not very well established between them and their primary partner. Um, which, I mean, if it's an open relationship, I don't mean to categorize it as cheating, but I suppose it's you know, it's complicated. There's a bit of a grey area when boundaries are being kind of like bent and crossed. Um, but I don't know. I think that there's just an interesting kind of ongoing commentary in my head, I suppose, about that desire, um, disloyalty, I suppose, and like self sabotage, in a way to like feed or give in to those like pure base instincts that bring so much shame. Um, and also the idea of the kind of idealized partner, um, as a entirely hollow vessel. Again, I think I was thinking about um open relationships. This is just because a lot of my mates are sort of either in or toying with the idea of being in open relationships. And I was just, I was mulling over how much energy it must take, I guess, to have all of these conscious egos, working and knocking up against each other and misinterpreting things and not entirely like understanding each other, in the way that everyone does in relationships, regardless of whether they are romantic or platonic or familial. The more people you have, the more complicated it becomes, especially when all of them are trying to achieve a similar level of quite intense connection. Um, because say in like a large family, like I come from a big family, um, I have very little kind of relationship with most of my kind of family members. There are very few that I have an actual kind of like understanding of as people, um, and even fewer who I have particularly strong opinions of. Um, and feel like, yeah, I think within a romantic relationship that kind of becomes so much more acute. Um, and I know a couple of people who are like solo polyamorous and will just be with people but not really have any kind of established partners. Um, and that's interesting too because I guess it kind of diminishes as much of a it does diminishes some responsibility, I guess, for the emotional labor of relationships. Um, and what I was thinking about, this is kind of my initial thought, is just the um relationships that I would idealize or kind of desire for when I was adolescent and was incredibly emotionally volatile and had a very, very low self esteem. And, was going through a lot, which I'm sure many people have found themselves in that position. And being in that position as well, you'll often be single because, of course, it's incredibly difficult to be with someone who has so, you know, much complex, um, so many complex mental health issues, um, or just like is going through so much. Um, but within that time, you crave, at least in my perspective, and again, this is kind of just a bit of a generalization, but you crave the kind of partner who doesn't really exist as a person. There's no kind of real psyche there, because that would diminish the care they could provide for you. So, I don't know, this like hollow representation of a person is really what you're seeking, which can't exist because half of the trouble with relationships, half of the fun of relationships is that you're working through them with another person. And that's so much more complicated, and it oftentimes doesn't make your life any easier, which is a fun thing to learn over time. Um, there are great parts, but I think it's really funny how in our society where um, traditional monogamous romance is seen as such a intrinsic important part of life, to the point where people are so torn up and isolated over the fact that they don't have that. Um, it's incredibly damaging, I think, to allow for people to kind of create this idealization because it's a completely, um, inachievable goal unless you are going to go the route of like getting like an AI girlfriend. But I feel like that's kind of the terrifying dystopian endpoint of this whole, thought thought train. But I don't really know enough about that to have much of a point. Anyway, this has been a massive ramble, but all that to say, I think on that point, I kind of came to the conclusion that, and this is in no means like groundbreaking, um, the lack of relationships or the lack of ability to build relationships um, outside of like romantic relationships, and the lack of emphasis of importance that we place on friendships and kind of working relationships and mentoring. I think, people could really fucking do with some mentors, especially like the younger people who I see like around me. The lack of like positive influence from older figures in their lives is shocking. Familial relationships are important, but I do think primarily like community and just having, when I say working relationships, I don't mean like workplace relationships. I mean more so in a sense, people who are on a similar level to you, who you can kind of share in that whole struggle with, um, but not necessarily have to worry about being talked down to by them, but then don't necessarily have as much emotional stakes as friendships. I think all of these are really important, and we don't know how to cultivate them very well, especially now when things are kind of becoming more and more isolated and more, you know, individual. Um, I think it's really funny that through the internet we sold this dream of free information and um, expanding our kind of connection to talk to anyone anywhere. And people use the internet, not to inform themselves a lot of the time, but to hide from information and to hide from other people. You know, it's most of the time you are spending, you know, hours and hours on your own, really. And that's the sad thing. You can be talking to someone, but it's not the same. Um, and it's really, really sad and disturbing to see the way that the generation, 10 years younger than me, um, how they are so deeply dependent on their phones as a sort of numbing device for um, just kind of like stimulating their base impulse, just feeding themselves white noise. I'm worried about them. I think they're going to be pretty fucked up. Um, and I worry about their ability to empathize enough with others to care about creating a better world. Um, so yeah, more thoughts on that probably at some point because heavy shit. But um, yeah, sorry, I my videos keep getting longer and longer because I keep chatting more and more shit. Um, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's good to have stuff to say. Yeah, I need to finish my tea, which has gotten cold now because I forgot to do it while filming. But bye bye from me and bye bye from the seal.